President Nick Tejas, and okay, and I'm getting some chat here, Mason, about audio. Thank you for sharing that information. But I'm going to keep doing my thing and hope that the audio gets a little better for you all. And if not, oh, I'm sorry, say that again, Mason. Okay, I'll start over. And this is all an opportunity for everyone to take their ASL classes now, because you wouldn't have had those issues if you all had your degrees. But good morning, everyone, and I hope you can hear me a little better. Before we get started for Convocation today, I just want to mention a couple things that will also be available in this coming Monday's Campus Weekly newsletter. You probably have seen from an email sent on Monday and from Vice President Tejas on yesterday that the Barnes & Noble online bookstore is ready to launch on Monday, August 16th. And a whole set of information is coming out on the new virtual bookstore. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to check your email from Nick Tejas to learn more about the new online bookstore. There's some really good details in there, as well as how the copy center and the on-ground bookstore is going to operate during the coming semester. So yeah, please go back and check that out if you haven't already. And you can anticipate more conversation and more information to be released in the coming days as the semester kicks off. And so there's this information and a lot more in Campus Weekly, which is delivered directly to your inbox every Monday. So thank you for that little commercial. And President Rowley, if you're ready to begin, I think we can get this semester convocated. Colleagues, I give you SFCC President Becky Rowley.
Thank you, Todd. Welcome back, everyone. I think I've told you every time that this is always one of my favorite times of the year, because I feel like the start of a new semester, especially in the fall, feels like a new beginning for all of us. And there's a lot for us to be very celebratory about right now. And then we also have some challenges ahead of us that are certainly within our capacity to overcome. And I'd like to talk to you all a little bit about all that for the next few minutes. So this is not going to be one of those charts and graphs presentations. You'll get a little bit of that later when we talk about policy stuff. I'm just going to talk to you about a few things that I think are important for us coming up, really focusing our next year. So I'd like to start with, so I'm not really going to, we don't have this set up to where we're going to answer questions at the end of this, but I will be following up shortly with the conversations with the president. And I think what I'm going to do is several conversations with the president that are a little bit more focused, where I will be giving a little bit more data and explanation about some things, and then we can, have lots of time for questions during those, so that this stays at a little bit higher level. So, as I said, welcome back. It's so good to be with all of you. I didn't really expect that we were going to be with each other in this format, but here we are again. And I will talk a little bit about COVID towards the end of my talk. But I wish I had more concrete details to give you about COVID, other than that it's just changing so quickly and we have to be aware. But I want to talk a little bit about the state of Santa Fe Community College for a few minutes. And what I can tell you overall is that the state of Santa Fe Community College is strong. As you all know, we have had some serious budget challenges. Our board declared a financial emergency, which we have still left in place. We have had to make some cuts to programs, cuts to many positions, not filling a lot of positions. But what that has done is it has allowed us to balance our budget and to shore up our budget to where we are not going to be looking at a year after year shortfall as we would have been before. This was the most difficult thing I've ever done. It difficult in making the decisions, difficult in watching the decisions being carried out, but I don't anticipate doing that anymore. We have come to a good spot. We have some other options if things change again. But I don't want people to walk around feeling like, oh my gosh, who's next? Who's next? No one's next. So, but I'm going to talk about enrollment in a little bit, and so there are some challenges there that I think that we all need to be aware of. But what will happen going forward is every time there's a vacancy in a position, we'll evaluate it very carefully to decide whether or not we need to fill those positions. Some we will fill, and some we will not. It'll just kind of depend upon what happens, and we may see new hires in different places because what we're doing is shifting. That is the difficult part of our business right now, and I'm referring to it as a business because it is. It's an industry, and we have to look at that side of it besides the what I would call the pure joy of learning that's also part of what we do. So we will wait for our fall enrollment numbers to come, to be fully finalized before we make any decisions about removing the financial emergency. We've talked about it. I've talked to the board about it. Nick and I talk about it. And so we're watching it, and we're looking towards being able to do that, but I don't want to do it too quickly. Our numbers are trending in the right direction, but they're still significantly down from where they were in 2019. I think most colleges, all the colleges in New Mexico that I'm aware of, are still in that situation, but that doesn't mean that it's not still a problem for us. So I want to talk a little bit about enrollment. And what I will say, first of all, is that enrollment matters a lot. As someone who has worked in higher ed for many, many years now as a faculty member and an administrator, I always find focusing on enrollment numbers to be frustrating and annoying. You want to focus on working with students and helping students and getting students through the pipeline and all that great stuff, and watching them, meet their goals. And that's what we want. We have to do that too. But there's a lot of pressure on us about enrollment. So we received a letter from the Higher Education Department a week or so ago requiring a response and an action plan because our enrollment has dropped 37% over the past 5 years. Now, a lot of that is due to COVID. As soon as I saw that number, and and you can watch the number trend year after year, I, asked Yash to, calculate what the figure was before COVID, and it was more like a steady 15% drop, which is pretty much in line with national averages, pretty much in line with what other colleges in our state have seen. Although there are a few colleges in New Mexico that have seen an over 50% enrollment decline over the last 5 years, and I would say definitely exacerbated by the pandemic. So the reason that HED has reached out to us, it's like a little warning letter, like you're getting close, but you're not there yet. House Bill 2, this past legislative session, had language in it stating that any college whose enrollment dropped 50% over a 5-year span would have to work with HED on kind of figuring out how that college was going to go forward. There are a few colleges, at least, two that I know of, that have hit that benchmark. I don't know what HED was, everybody who hit 35% or something got a letter. I'm still trying to figure that out. But we did. We are working on it. So that's a pretty sobering thing to have, to know that, we're in kind of a precarious situation with that. I think everybody assumes that as we open back up more fully, which we are doing, even though this is a really kind of a scary COVID time again, that our numbers will go back up. They are going back up, but they have a long ways to go. So here's what our response is to the HED letter about what are you going to do about this. So we have an enrollment management strategy now, and are kind of approaching this from a task force methodology that's focusing on 3 specific areas. The first one is focusing on increasing the number of matriculated students coming straight out of high school. So this means that, we've been recruiting very well with all the Santa Fe public high schools, the charter schools in the area, and even schools that are way outside our area, like Raton and Pecos and different schools like that. But we have to update our attitude about dual credit students. They are critically important to us because these are students that, if they're taking the right courses that are going to lead into a degree, that are going to give them kind of the baseline requirements, some of the gen ed requirements for a degree, they will come to Santa Fe Community College. So we need to welcome them. We need to work with them. We need them to know that they are vitally important to us and that we really are invested in their success. The second thing that we need to look at is increasing the semester-to-semester retention of continuing students. And we have been doing a much better job of that over the last couple of years. Before I got here, you all had been working on some great strategies to get that number up and to keep that number sustained. And we've been doing a good job at that. Even through COVID, I think we've done pretty well. But that's going to be a continuing focus. So, a lot of times when you talk about enrollment strategies, people always say that, well, the easiest thing you can do is keep the students that you have. Yes, except that it's not always that easy. So we will be working on keeping the students that we have and helping them move through their degree plan in the most expedited way that we can do. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then the third thing is to try to increase the number of credits that students are taking as students. So that our enrollment, we look at the head count, the number of individual students that we have, and then we look at the full-time equivalency, which is the course load that those students are taking. And our individual head count is doing really pretty well, and it did pretty well over the summer. But the individual loads of students, that's where we need to work. And so we've made a couple of changes in our tuition structure so that students are not going to be charged if they take charged extra after they're taking 12 credit hours. They can take 15 or 18 without paying any additional tuition. And then we have a lot of financial aid available right now. And everybody should tell any potential student that you're talking to that there is a lot of aid available. The federal programs are really strong right now. The state programs are really strong. And our foundation has done an excellent job of raising additional funds during a pandemic so that we have a lot to offer our students. And for people to walk away assuming that they can't afford to come to Santa Fe Community College is really almost a tragedy, because I really think that we shouldn't be turning anybody away because they can't afford to pay. We just need to help them figure out those resources. But it's clear, it's simple math, that if students take more hours per semester, they will graduate more quickly. And we need to figure out ways to help them do that. So those are our primary strategies that we'll respond to HED with, and those are things that we were already working on, and so we can just follow up with that. There were two data points that I saw a couple of days ago. Barb Griego submits this massive report called the AGA report, and every college in the state submits these numbers. So I'd seen our numbers. And then a few days ago, I got our numbers in relation to everyone else's numbers. And there are two things that are very troubling. First of all, Santa Fe Community College has, I don't know if you want to say that we're first or last, but the longest time to complete a degree of any college in the state. And it's significantly higher. It's over 99 credits on average for students to complete a degree. That doesn't mean our degree plans are too long. We've done a great job cutting those back. But most of the other colleges were down in the 70s and 80s. There are even a couple that are in the 60s. So that's not a simple thing. That's not just, it's partly students changing their minds, but it's also that we put up roadblocks for students. And this is what I want to really focus on, is trying to remove those roadblocks from students. So our students take more credits to graduate, and then, as you might expect, they take longer to graduate. So we also have the longest length of time to complete a degree, or 2-year degree of anybody in the state. So this is going to be a problem. The legislature is going to put us front and center and ask us why we have these things. I can almost guarantee you that in the LFC reports, little report card things that Mark Valenzuela sends out, that's going to be highlighted. And so we will have to answer those questions. And it's not just about answering those questions, it's about changing some of our practices so that we can actually make some changes to those data points. So there are some serious equity issues that these data points bring up. Our peers don't have the same gatekeeping mechanisms in place that Santa Fe Community College has. And I know we did this, everybody did this several years ago because it seemed like the best thing to do in terms of helping student achievement and helping students improve their skills in English, in reading and writing, and in math too. But that hasn't happened. What's happened is that we've revealed that there is a serious equity issue in terms of implementing strong developmental ed requirements and not letting people take almost any general education courses until they test at college level English. So 90% of our students of color are testing into developmental courses. They are statistically, just by being in that group, way, way, way less likely to graduate, ever. Not just in that long pipeline, but ever. And so we need to look at, this has been studied to death. The data shows that what happens is that students get in the developmental ed pipeline, they drop out because their length of time to complete is so far extended that they just never complete. So that doesn't mean that we just let them take whatever they want and hope for the best, because that's not a good strategy either. But there are lots and lots of support programs, accelerated time frames for developmental courses, lots of things that we can look at. The point is that we have to be through with the pilot. This has been studied nationally forever. We are not different in this regard. Our students are not different in this regard, and we need to do right by them. This is a troubling data point, but this is not just about data. This is about individual students and whether or not we're going to help them meet the goals that they aspire to and try to achieve a more prosperous life. PDAC has been working really, really hard on. They worked hard on equity issues, and there was a committee that created a lovely equity statement that I am very proud of. But now we need to live up to that equity statement and not just keep having our students take more classes that studies have shown don't really help them at all. So the pilot's over. We've studied this endlessly. We know the answer. There are way too many students trapped in developmental ed, and so now we have to figure out how to get them placed into college level courses. So what we should be doing is trying to eliminate developmental ed. We won't, but we need to be placing as many students in college level classes as we can and trying to keep them out of developmental ed and creating support systems along the way. And I'd like to see this done this year. I mean, it's a challenge for all of us. I will help in any way that I can, but everyone else is already doing this, and we need to catch up. We need to change those numbers. We need to provide better opportunities for our students. We need to look at multiple measures. We need to not just look at them, we need to use them. So one of the things too that will help this, we've had an increasing number of dual credit students over the years, which is fantastic. But a lot of our dual credit students take electives, but very few of them at Santa Fe High School or at Capitol High School take general education courses. I mean, it's a really, really low number. And so I met with Veronica Garcia, and I've met with the new superintendent, Larry Chavez, who I believe used to be my dual credit student when he was in high school in Santa Rosa. And we were talking about making a cohort of gen ed classes that high school students could take, so that as they're taking dual credit, they're actually getting something that's going to transfer. So our focus in dual credit needs to be classes that will transfer. And I'm pretty sure that's what the legislature thinks that we're doing. And if they find out that we're not doing that, there's probably going to be some difficult conversations about that. So that means that there are going to be a lot more high school students that are working with all of our student services offices to get advised, to think about careers, do all of those things, because we're basically not really working with that population in as robust a fashion as we need to do. So we're looking at this as not something that, you know, we might do. It's not whether or not we're going to do it, it's how we're going to do it. And we need to look at the nuts and bolts of how to get this done. In really focusing on student success, we can finally achieve some of the equity, close some of the equity gaps that we've been talking about for quite some time. The board is always challenging me to focus on student success, to look at, you know, how we are helping our students improve. And so I know this is not all about data. You know, for most of us, data can become very, you know, an annoyance, but the problem is we can't ignore it. And that's what we're being measured on. Everybody that from accrediting agencies to legislative bodies, they're looking at our data and and making assumptions about what we're doing or not doing based upon that. And so we have to look at that and take that seriously as it's a real issue. I know that this all sounds like a difficult lift at a time when we're still trying to figure out how we come back and what things are going to look like. It's going to be a challenge, and I don't want to underestimate that or just act like, oh, we can do it. It's not that big a deal. It is a big deal, but I think we make it our primary focus so that we can get on to other things. We all have a really, really, really important role to play in recruiting students and making them feel valued. Whatever you do, whatever your job is here, you're a really valuable part of Santa Fe Community College. And I think that we need to remember that and make all of our students feel welcome and know that even if they're not fully enrolled in Santa Fe Community College yet, that's exactly where that's where we hope for them to be and to graduate and to have a more independent life. So enough about that. I'll follow up with more details about that, and we will look at more charts and graphs if you'd like to when we have the next conversation with the president. I do want to mention a little bit about our ERP project that is getting ready to really accelerate. And for some of you, that probably sounds terrifying because you already feel like it's been accelerating. So our board is meeting tonight to hopefully approve a resolution and for an MOU that will allow us, when I say us, I mean the other colleges, the 4 other colleges that are going together in this project now. So Santa Fe Community College, CNM, Clovis Community College, Northern New Mexico College, and San Juan have formed a nonprofit. And what that does is it allows the nonprofit will be really handling the financing and the contracting for this project. It's a different move for Santa Fe Community College. It's a different move for most of our other colleges. It is undoubtedly the biggest, most complex project that any college in our state has taken on, to band together with other colleges like this and to form this separate collaborative so that we can work together. It is a big ask, I realize, to have everybody working on this. As we put our RFP together, there were over 120 employees from across those colleges who came together to work on the specifications. That right there is huge. But this is going to be a 4 to 5 year project. It will involve some people more than others. I think we're doing a good job so far of backfilling positions where some people are being asked to work 75% of their time on this new project. So the vendor will be revealed very soon, like in the next couple of days. I know Laura's listening to me like, don't say any more than that. The vendor will be revealed in the next couple of days. And so then we really get to work. And when that happens, we can start working with our vendor, start moving on the project, putting it all together. Obviously, OIT plays a central role in this project. And so I want to, on their behalf, ask you all for patience in requesting new projects. There is not a moratorium on new projects or anything, but we won't be taking on new projects that are not absolutely critical to what we're doing. You know, that it's always been sort of a challenge to take on new projects, but now there are going to be a few people in OIT that are pretty much pulled out exclusively to work on the ERP. We will be trying to find new people, temps to come in and take those positions while they're working on that. We have legislative funding to cover these positions. So a lot of the funding for the project is coming from the New Mexico legislature. We have a big ask in front of them coming up in the next session. We have a federal earmark that we are supposed to get in the next few months. So it's coming together in that sense. But the human power that's involved in this is enormous, and I can't emphasize that enough. And please, what I'm asking is that you be nice to each other, that we're patient with each other, and that we try to help each other through this. It's an incredible opportunity for all of us, but it is going to be a great challenge, and I'm well aware of that. So I want to wrap up with a few remarks about COVID. I don't even know what to say, honestly. Except I do want to say that I am incredibly proud of the response that Santa Fe Community College has had to COVID all throughout this long time that we've been working like this mostly. We've been careful. We've been very thoughtful. We've had a lot of input from pretty much anybody who wanted to have something to say about what we were doing. And I think it's really made us proceed in a cautious manner that has been better for our students and for our staff. So not removing the mask mandate was, I don't know that I would say that was a conscious decision. It might have just been that we didn't get around to it, but either way, it was the smartest thing we've done. We will be implementing a vaccine mandate. That will be coming soon. It will be something where faculty, staff, and students have a couple of months to be able to be fully in compliance with that. There will be, some exceptions for health reasons. If you have a documented, thing from your physician saying that you shouldn't get the vaccine, then, of course, there will be some exceptions like that. And partly what we're working on are, what those exceptions will be and how to craft that. But we are going to have to mandate a vaccine. It's the best way that we can keep our community safe. We are hearing we had a couple of cases reported yesterday. I know a case reported from somebody who was vaccinated and was hospitalized. So this is kind of scary. The numbers in the state are way up. The numbers in the hospitals are way up. And so we have to be really careful. And the best way that we can do that is wearing a mask on campus. I don't know when we'll stop wearing a mask on campus, but the combination of the mask and vaccination is the best thing we can do. And we're not going to congregate. We're going to, come on campus, but we're not going to cram ourselves into a conference room and do things like that. We're going to make sure that we're still maintaining some reasonable distance so that we can keep each other safe until we no longer need to do so. And I wish I had more information about when that would be, but obviously I don't. So somehow or another during all of this, we have managed to make some great strides. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is the way that we've been able to be innovative during COVID. I think everybody, I was on the verge of panic when we had to shut down and go completely remote. And I know a number of other people were too, because they told me. But as we've watched the evolution, I look at places like, the fitness center implemented a touchless check-in system during COVID. That's the greatest invention ever. That's not going away. To be able to reserve something before you actually go to the fitness center, you don't have to wait. You just go right to your lane, equipment, whatever. I mean, I wish I would have invented that. So things like that have happened during COVID. We've had lots and lots of courses where faculty have innovated in ways that I really didn't think was possible. I thought, oh, they're really going to have a hard time bringing that online and making that work. And then, I hear all these examples about how different classes that, in art classes and things, that they're able to do things remotely that students actually like in certain ways. And then to combine that with time on campus in a different fashion, it's worked really well. We want to get back to on-campus instruction as much as our students want it, but we'll have to see what that actually looks like, because I think a lot of students have learned about, convenience and innovation in online everything. Another interesting data point that I noticed was that nationally, there's been a 25% increase in accessing advising as advising has been offered in a virtual setting. So now our advising is offered virtually too, and more students take advantage of it because it's easier to access. Some students feel more comfortable accessing a virtual service than they do talking to somebody. That's a great option. That's not going to go away. So we have come through this. We are coming through this pandemic stronger than we were. Yes, we have enrollment challenges. We will work on those. We know what we need to do. We will make improvements there. It will be a tough climb. Our ERP project will actually has a lot of, we'll have a lot of enrollment management pieces that are built into that too. It all comes together. We have a lot of hard work in front of us, but I can honestly say I've never worked before with a more dedicated, a more talented, and a more creative staff than I do at Santa Fe Community College. So I'm really eager to hear what you all have for suggestions and going forward, and how we can make things better for our students and also for ourselves too. So I will, there will be, this is kind of one of the things that Todd teased up, there will be more information about the masks or the vaccination mandate and when that will go into effect, how it will go into effect, and all of those things. But, I encourage anyone who's interested to attend the COVID meetings Tuesdays at 4. They're open. Anybody can talk, anybody can ask questions. If you're just curious, it's a good way to find out what's going on. So I want to thank you for bearing with me without charts and graphs for the past half hour. I want to thank you for being part of Santa Fe Community College, and thank you for doing all that you do for our students. I know it's been difficult. I know it's going to be difficult going forward, but I know that we will be able to exceed whatever goals that we've set for ourselves. So have a great semester. Now, so the next part of our program will involve some charts and graphs. And so I have the distinct pleasure of, I will introduce in just a moment, Luis Olivas, who is the Director of Human Resources, and also Mariposa Sivic, who is one of our legal counsel. And they're going to give you a little bit of more background on some of our policies. So I want to just say a couple of words to kind of tee up what they're going to talk to you about. As everyone I think knows, Santa Fe Community College has a pretty robust system of policies that we're all responsible for knowing and implementing. And some of those policies are probably never going to touch your life, and some of them affect your day-to-day everything at Santa Fe Community College. So we are going to talk a little bit today about some changes to the Title IX policy, which has to do with reporting sexual assault on campus. And then also we're going to talk a little bit about the policy that deals with the inspection of public records. So there will be some riveting conversation about inspection of public records, because I know that everybody is really interested in that, but there's a clear process to follow in doing that we all need to be aware about. So the policy, all of our policies are posted on our website. They're arranged by section. And so, they're periodically in the portals that we all have for continue for HR training, there will be updates to policies or requirements that we read certain policies to be aware of those. So I ask you all to take that seriously and to stay current with all of the policy training that you can, and to ask questions if you have concerns about them or concerns about the process or just things that are not very clear to you. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Luis Olivas and Mariposa Sivage, and they are going to talk to you about, in more depth and detail, about some of the current policies that we're going to be working on. So, Luis?
Thank you, President Rowley, for inviting me and allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I just want to touch base on the importance of continuing to abide by all of our policies, not just the policies we'll be speaking about today. Our policies, procedures, rules, they continue to apply to all of us as we continue to work in a hybrid environment. But specifically today, I wanted to speak to everyone about College Policy 4-1, our workplace ethics and code of conduct policy. Having respect for each other and our stakeholders, citizens of Santa Fe County, is part of what makes Santa Fe a great place to work and a great place our community can be proud of. One of the cornerstones of community is how we treat each other, and that's expressed in our code of conduct policy. As a campus community, we need to be respectful and professional in all our dealings with other employees, students, and members of the greater community. Policy 4-1, our Code of Conduct and Ethics policy, states that all employees are to be held to the highest standards of ethics and conduct, and establishes the standards of conduct that the college requires all employees to follow in engaging with their fellow employees and the community. Policy applies to all aspects of employment and communications at Santa Fe Community College, including the performance of job duties and other services provided to the college. Policy 4-1, Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct, continues that all employees are required to perform their duties in a professional, honest, ethical, and civil manner, and behave in a manner that upholds the integrity and reputation of the college. This includes obeying all policies and procedures established by the college and by all state and federal laws. Specifically, touches on civility, honesty, and integrity. Civility is defined as behavior or speech appropriate to civil interactions, politeness, courtesy, and consideration, essentially the absence of rudeness. To me, this means finding a common space and understanding when we don't always agree, but we can find a way to work together. It brings notions of collegiality to mind. Honesty. The quality or condition of having or displaying strong moral principles, especially with regard to lying, cheating, or stealing, fair dealing, truthfulness, and integrity. And integrity itself is a strict adherence to standard of values and conduct. To me, integrity means doing the right thing, even when no one is looking or ever going to find out. And often this is extra work, but ultimately it's worth it in my experience. The college's ethics and code of conduct policy is the underlying principle that we should keep in mind at all times. I would also be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to also mention the importance of our internal controls along with state and federal laws as it relates to procurement and procurement procedures. Policy 4-1 does require that all employees who witness any violation of our code of conduct or any college policy or law report it to their supervisor or the Human Resources Office immediately. Anyone who reports a suspected policy violation in good faith will be protected from retaliation. Procedures related to Policy 4-1, our Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct, do provide greater detail about issues arising around this policy and other issues. There are other available resources on our college policy website and our intranet, including information on confidential information, as well as Ipra requests, which Mariposa Savage, our college legal counsel, will now address. Mariposa?
Thank you, Luis. And everyone, just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to attempt to share my screen and see if we can have some slides for y'all to look at instead of just looking at me. So let me see if I can accomplish that, because as President Rowley said, we should all be able to do this at this point, because we've learned how to innovate and do new things. So hopefully it works.
Thank you, Mariposa. And while you're preparing that, oh, there you go.
Is it up?
It's up, Mariposa.
Okay, give me just 1 second to find my team screen and move it over so I can see that really quickly. Maybe if I can get it to move. There we go. Give me just 1 more second. Okay. So as Luis and President Rowley said, we're going to talk briefly about the Inspection of Public Records Act. And the reason that President Rowley wanted us to discuss this today, and Todd Lovato also wanted us to discuss this today, was just as a reminder to everyone. Campus community does a pretty good job of complying with our policy and understanding it, but there's a couple important things in terms of the law that everyone should be aware of, not only for your own personal information, but also for the benefit of the college. So really quickly, as you all know, Santa Fe Community College is a public entity, which means that we're subject to the Inspection of Public Records Act. And the definition of public records, we fall definitely in the definition, as you can see there, of public body, any branch of government that receives public funding, political subdivisions, school districts, and institutions of higher education. Public records is defined very broadly by the law as all documents, papers, letters, books, maps, tapes, photographs, recording, and other materials, regardless of physical form or characteristic, that are used, created, received, maintained, or held by or on behalf of any public body and relate to public business, whether or not the records are required by law to be created or maintained. So what does that mean in English? Basically, any documents and records that are created during the course of employment or by the college related to college business can be considered, and generally is, a public record. Now, there are various exceptions to what constitutes public record. And if I can get my machine to change to the next slide. There we go. So we'll get to the exceptions in a minute, but one of the things, and I'm sure everyone had heard it when it was very prominent in the news a few years ago, and it continues to come in and out from various different public entities in the news, every so often. But one of the things that everyone needs to be aware of is the use of their SFCC email. Email of a public entity and its employees is typically, if it's related to the business of the college and the purpose of the college, is public record and is subject to disclosure under Ipra if a request is received. Email that's used to conduct public business is public record, even when a personal email account is used, which is why the college encourages all employees to use their SFCC email account for college business, communicating with students, the community, other stakeholders, each other. Using your SFCC email is the best and simplest way for you all to not be subject to a request from me to search your personal emails for use in responding to an Ipra request. And it would only be a search of personal emails related to school business. So for example, if for some reason a faculty member or a staff member was using their personal email to communicate with a student, and we had a request for communications related to that particular student, if you're using your personal email, I'm going to have to ask you to search your personal email to retain your personal email and not delete it because it is public record. And there's been not only Attorney General guidance on that, as you can see from the slide. The Attorney General has an Ipra, and I apologize. I thought I had fixed that typo. It should have been the Ipra compliance guide, as it says in the parenthetical. And as it says on the slide, not every email of a public employee or public official is considered a public record. It must relate to the public business and be maintained and held on behalf of a public body. But if you use a private email or private computer, documents and emails and records about public business are subject to Ipra and have to be turned over. So I don't want to beat that horse any further. I just wanted you all to be aware of that, especially in the virtual environment that we are existing in right now, and the fact that you all are working very virtually and using email and other platforms such as Teams and Zoom and other means of communication with one another, that they are, most likely public records. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which is the exceptions to what is a public record. And so this will give you guys kind of an idea of where things are not public record or what can be excluded from a request. But of course, every request and the information requested, once it's reviewed, has to be analyzed to see if it has to be disclosed under Ipra or if it falls into one of these exceptions. The biggest exception for SFCC, obviously, is going to be FERPA for student information. And that falls in the H, the very last bullet point, as otherwise provided by law. And obviously, if you get a request for student records, those need to go to the registrar, but they may also need to go to Todd, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the exclusions are records pertaining to physical or medical examinations and medical treatment of persons confined to an institution, letters of reference concerning employment, licensing, or permits, letters or memorandums that are matters of opinion in personnel files or student cumulative files, and then FERPA deals with students, but with regard to personnel files, much information, letters or memorandum that are matters of opinion, disciplinary things fall within that, letters of reference fall within that, but other items in personnel files and salary information, those types of things are public record and don't fall into that exclusion. Confidential law enforcement records, which doesn't apply to SFCC. The Confidential Materials Act is a law that talks about basically archiving and donated materials that are designated by a donor as confidential. It doesn't, technically apply to day-to-day business. Trade secrets, attorney-client privilege information, long-range or strategic business plans of public hospitals, tactical response plans or procedures prepared by the state, safety plans, those types of things, and then as otherwise provided by law. And there's a giant list of what falls into that category, but again, it's a request analysis that's specific to each request on an individualized basis. So the reason that Ipra is important for you guys, number one, is what we just talked about, the use of SFCC email and maintaining public records properly. But the reason that we care is because there is an enforcement provision, and if SFCC does not properly and timely respond to Ipra requests, it can be subject to liability. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So the conclusion of the Ipra is that everyone should be familiar with policy 8-3. Again, they're on the website and on your intranet. But if you receive a request, most people send them directly to Todd Lovato. He's the records custodian designated under Ipra for SFCC. But sometimes people send an Ipra request or request for documents or information directly to someone they know. And if you receive a request for public records, it needs to immediately be forwarded to the records custodian, Todd Lovato. And so The reason for that is because we have time frames under Ipra. There's an immediate time frame, there's a 3-day time frame, there's a 14-day time frame. They can be extended upon agreement, but the initial time frames for our initial response cannot. So that's why it's important that you all follow policy 8-3, and if you receive a public records request, send it to Todd. If you are in doubt whether it's a request for student records or public records, send it to both the registrar and to Todd, and then they can work out between themselves whose responsibility it is to respond to that request. Okay, so we're going to switch gears from the fabulous and exciting thing of Ipra to Title IX. As you all probably know, in 2020, the Trump administration passed new regulations related to Title IX that expanded the hearing processes and procedures for an accused, and put in place a lot of new regulatory requirements for Title IX reporting. And Title IX is the federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in education. And I've quoted what Title IX, specifically states, and it's related to our federal funding, and it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education, employment, educational programs, activities, and employment. So the reason we're going to talk about Title IX is twofold. Number one is that it applies to everyone in the campus community, students, staff, faculty, all employees, and visitors and volunteers. And so I wanted to give you guys a little bit of familiarity with what it is. But the other thing is, Becky and Laura have identified, and the governing board has identified, many policies that need to be reviewed this year. But under the regulations, we also need to update and change the Title IX policy to comply with current regulations. And so there's the changes that Title IX is required to SFCC policies are very extensive. And when you all start your shared governance process of reviewing those policies, you may have questions and concerns about things that need to get changed. But the bulk of the changes that you will see in, for example, 4-50, in a new Title IX standalone policy for students, in some of the other ones that deal with harassment and discrimination, the Title IX requirements are by regulation, they are by law, and we have to have them written down the way that they are going to be presented to you. So as you have questions, please raise them during your policy process. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that there's going to be, not a whole lot of room to make changes, and you can provide your feedback as normal, and it's encouraged to provide feedback, but the ability to make changes to any of the processes, procedures, responsibilities likely does not exist because they are required by the federal regulations. So back to the Title IX overview, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up quickly. Title IX protects students, employees, and third parties from sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, and violence by any employee, another student, or non-employee third party. So vendors, contractors, visitors, users of, for example, the fitness facilities. It applies to everyone who comes to campus. So the 2020 regulations that I just talked about require us to respond promptly and supportively to persons alleged to have been victimized by sexual harassment, resolve allegations of sexual harassment promptly and accurately under a new and different kind of predictable grievance process that provides a lot of due process protections for both the alleged victim and the alleged perpetrator of sexual harassment, and to effectively implement remedies for victims. The 2020 regulations define, and we'll talk a little bit more about these definitions, sexual harassment to include sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, and then general sexual harassment, and its unlawful discrimination on the basis of sex. We have to have clear, accessible options for any person to report sexual harassment. We need to provide supportive measures to the alleged victim. Where we don't have this, but for other institutions of higher education, the college can be responsible for off-campus sexual harassment at houses owned or under the control of, or in athletic programs. The purpose of the regulation, I thought I had fixed restores, but was to enhance fairness on college and university campuses by providing the accused a written notice of the allegations, the right to an advisor, the right to submit and cross-examine and challenge evidence. And the Title IX process, once an allegation has been made and the process begins, that process is confidential as to the victim and the accused. So, sexual harassment can exist under the law in various forms. Quid pro quo, which there's a definition there, but it's basically, an exchange that you get this if you do that, that has an unwelcome sexual connotation to it. Sexual harassment can be verbal, physical, or electronic. The definition under case law is unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it denies a person equal access to the recipient's education, program, or activity. Dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and what's really important, just like with what Louise talked about with 4-1, under Title IX, anyone exercising their rights under Title IX or making a report under Title IX as required, retaliation is prohibited against complainants, witnesses, or any other individual involved in the investigation, proceeding, or the hearing. So this is the part that we wanted to draw to your guys' attention. There is a distinct Title IX webpage on SFCC's website. There are links to the Title IX webpage in almost every page. And there are various individuals who can receive the report, but the initial report of a complaint or a problem that falls under Title IX is to be made to the Title IX coordinator. Obviously, if it's an employee-employee situation, it should also be reported to HR so that HR and the Title IX coordinator can determine whether it falls under Title IX or one of the other college policies dealing with these issues. But any person can report third parties, visitors, employees, a student's parent or guardian, and the report can be verbal or written, and it can be reported in person, by mail, or by email. So we talked about already that we're going to have policies and changes, and I did a very short overview. I know that down the road, as we move forward, I think there's going to be some other sexual harassment and discrimination training and Title IX, but if you have any questions, I did not go through the full new investigative process, the due process hearing, and the appeal processes, but we do have the individuals identified and trained to conduct investigations. Margaret is presently the Title IX coordinator. I think that is going to change in the future, and maybe Michelle Harding out of HR to be the Title IX coordinator. Bobby Mascarenas is currently a Title IX investigator. We have some other investigators, and we have the hearing determiner and the appeal determiner identified as we move forward. So if you have any changes on this, or if you see or hear something that just doesn't seem to be right, or sounds to you like it falls under any of the categories that I briefly overviewed with you today, please talk to HR or reach out to Margaret as the Title IX coordinator to see if an investigation or if anything else is required to proceed with compliance with Title IX. And I think that was my last slide. It is. So let's see if I can stop sharing.
Thank you, Mariposa. And just for the college to know, we are working on rolling out training that will help individuals recognize inappropriate behavior and how to respond when they witness something that is inappropriate and how to report it. But Mariposa, I do want to ask just for a summary of some of the key points you brought up. Again, some of our policy language and procedure, we just cannot change. It is required by law, and that's important for everyone to recognize. Additionally, Ipra request, if an employee receives something that they believe is a request, please immediately loop in Todd Lovato. He'll be able to examine it and assess whether this is a public record request. And lastly, our Title IX changes. There are quite a bit of policies that are impacted by Title IX changes. And Mariposa, I'm sure you can speak more to this, but although we're updating policies now, they may again change and be updated as we are seeing new guidance from the Department of Education. So it's very important that everyone is aware that just because we're speaking about Title IX and all the changes that are set to take place, they may very well change again very soon. So it's very important that everyone is aware of that.
Yes, and thank you for that, Luis. And one last item on that subject. Even though the written policies for SFCC have not yet gone through policy process and been approved by the governing board, SFCC is required to comply with the current regulations. And so that's why the policy process is going to start for the Title IX policy here in the near future. But as we move forward, until they're finalized, we're still bound to comply with the regulations. And the website gives the reporting requirements and other things, but the hearing processes that are in current policy are different than what is required under the regulations, and we are required to follow the hearing process and the investigatory process under the current regulations, which you all will see as these draft policies start being circulated.
Thank you.
And I think that's all Luis and I had on policy, President Rowley, so I don't know what's next on your guys' agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariposa and Luis. I really appreciate the update. You're very clear. These, as Mariposa mentioned, even though our policy hasn't quite caught up to the current Title V changes, we're still required by law to follow the current Title IX guidelines. They have changed. They change during political administration sometimes, and we have to stay current. And it's kind of difficult sometimes. There's a lot of training involved for all the people who are part of this process. So that concludes our general session for Convocation today. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of you who participated in putting this all together. It always, there's a lot more involved in it than might be readily apparent. I know a lot of you have, there are many other meetings and trainings today, tomorrow, all next week. And classes start the following week. So I want to thank you all for everything you do for Santa Fe Community College. I consider it a privilege to get to work with you, and I hope that